Another challenge which the business community is facing is with respect to determining what is the place of supply for goods or what is place of supply for services. Now let us understand what is the concept of place of supply. The concept of place of supply is that depending on the determination of place of supply and location of the supplier, a assessee can determine whether he is supposed to pay CGST plus HGST, saying that the transaction is intrastate, or he is required to pay IGST, saying that the transaction is an interstate transaction. So let us take an example. If I am supplying goods from Pune to a customer in Gujarat, typically this kind of transaction is an interstate transaction. Now, in the example, we have assumed that the transaction is FOR basis, that is, it's a free on road, that is, I will be delivering the goods to the Gujarat customer at his doorstep. But now let us change the scenario. What if the transaction is an ex-factory transaction? That is, the Gujarat customer will take the goods from my factory, and the transfer of property in goods as well as delivery to the customer will happen at my factory gate. Now, whether this kind of a transaction would be an ex-factory transaction, that is an intrastate transaction, or whether it will continue to be an interstate transaction. Based on the interpretation of section 10 of IGST Act, this transaction could be said to be an interstate transaction. However, many businesses are facing challenges in determining this kind of scenario. So I think this particular aspect should also be clarified by the government in days to come. Otherwise, the assessee will pay CGST plus HGST, assuming it to be an intrastate transaction, and during the assessment, the government officer will say that this is an interstate transaction, demanding IGST again on the same transaction. So the government should provide enough clarification on this particular aspect. The next challenge which the businesses are facing is which tax they should pay. Take example of a scenario wherein the assessee has provided the service in the month of June. However, he has raised invoices in the month of July. Question is, which tax is applicable in such scenario? Is it service tax because the service was provided in the month of June, or is it GST because the invoice is dated July? Now, on this particular aspect, if you refer the transitional provision, that is section 142 subclause 11b, the law says that if a supply has taken place before GST law and if service tax was applicable on such transaction, in that case GST law will not be applicable. Thus, if the service is provided in the month of June, typically service tax would be applicable. However, in one of a recent clarification, clarified that in such cases GST would be applicable. So, the assessee is now in a dilemma as to which tax he should charge. Should he go by the law or should he go by the clarification issued by the government authorities? On this aspect also, it would be helpful if the government comes out with a clarification. Third practical challenges which the assessee is facing are with respect to reverse charge mechanism. Take example of, say, rent-a-cab service. If the rent-a-cab service is availed in the month of June, payment of such invoice is made in the month of July, what the assessee should do? Should he pay service tax because service was provided in the month of June, or should he not pay service tax because the payment, that is the point of supply, has taken place in GST regime, and in GST regime reverse charge mechanism is not applicable on rent-a-cab service. Particularly if rent-a-cab service provider is registered, what should he do? Should he pay tax or should he not? Now this same question is also applicable for security services, manpower services as well as work contract services, because all these four services which were under the ambit of reverse charge mechanism in the service tax law are now not under the ambit of reverse charge mechanism if the supplier is a registered supplier. So on this aspect also, because there are different tax positions which are being adopted by the taxpayer, it would be a welcome step if the government clarifies this through a detailed circular.